Forget everything you have been told about destiny. There exists a law older than history and more solid than gravity. Your vibration is the mold of your reality. This is not a book of comforting theories. It is a precision weapon for the spirit. Each chapter is a jolt of reality that shatters your limits. Each practice, a leap into the void toward your true potential. Do not read this if you wish to remain the same. Read it if you are ready to reclaim the power that has always belonged to you. Chapter 1. The Language, the Universe. Already knows. Once upon a time, there was a woman named Clara who lived by a quiet lake on the outskirts of a small town. Every morning, before the world awoke, Clara would walk to the shore and stand still, gazing at the water's surface. She didn't pray aloud. She didn't ask for anything. She simply watched. Her neighbors considered her eccentric. Some said she was a woman who had lost hope, content to observe life from afar instead of living it. But Clara knew something her neighbors couldn't yet see. That silence has a language, and that this language is the only one the universe answers without delay. For years, Clara had tried to manifest changes in her life the way the world had taught her. She had made wish lists. She had repeated affirmations in front of the mirror. She had visualized with her eyes closed and her fists clenched, like someone trying to force a flower to open by pulling its petals. And nothing had worked. Or rather, something did work, but in reverse. The more force she put into wanting, the more elusive what she desired became. It was during one of those mornings by the lake that Clara had her first real revelation. She observed how the water didn't struggle to reflect the sky. It simply reflected it, because it was its nature to do so. The lake didn't ask the clouds for permission to display them on its surface. It had no anxiety about the sunrise. It didn't worry if the sun took longer than expected. The lake simply was, and in that tranquil, profound being, it contained the perfect reflection of everything that existed above it. At that moment, Clara understood a truth that books rarely express clearly. Manifestation is not an act of will. It is an act of nature. The universe doesn't respond to force. It responds to frequency. And the most powerful frequency a human being can emit isn't that of desperate desire, but that of calm knowing. There's a vast difference between wanting something and knowing it already belongs to you. Desperate desire carries a vibration of lack. It says, I don't have it. I need it. Calm knowing carries a vibration of fullness. It says, it's already mine. I'm just waiting for it to arrive. This distinction is the foundation of everything you will learn on these pages. The ancient masters of East and West spoke of this principle with different words, but all pointed to the same truth. The Hermeticists called it the principle of correspondence. As within, so without. The masters of India called it the Akashic field, the space where all possibility exists before materializing. The masters of the Judeo-Christian tradition spoke of faith as the substance of what is hoped for. Different maps, same territory. The law of attraction, in its purest form, is not a mental trick or a visualization technique. It is a description of how reality works at an energetic level. Everything in the universe is vibration. Matter, at its deepest level, is energy in motion. Thoughts are energy. Emotions are energy. And the law that governs the interaction between these energies is as constant as gravity. Like attracts like. What you put out, you receive back amplified. This has an implication that may feel uncomfortable at first. Your current circumstances are a true reflection of your deepest vibrational patterns. Not of your conscious desires, but of your subconscious beliefs. Not of what you say you want, but of what deep within your being you believe you deserve and expect. Clara spent many years wanting to change her life, while internally believing that change was difficult for her. Every affirmation she repeated was immediately contradicted by a deeper voice that whispered, "This isn't for you." And that deep voice, that ingrained conviction, was what the universe heard most clearly. The day by the lake was the beginning of a different kind of change. Not the kind that comes from doing more or wanting more. The kind of change that comes from being different. From tuning into a higher frequency from within, not from without. There are two ways to relate to the law of attraction. The first is the hunter's approach, actively pursuing what you desire, striving to capture it, clinging to it. This approach produces sporadic results and chronic exhaustion. The second is the magnet's approach, becoming what you wish to attract, raising your vibration until what you seek has no choice but to find you. This approach produces consistent results and inner peace. Clara learned to be the lake, to reflect within herself the reality she wanted to see manifested on the outside. And slowly, without drama or exaggerated effort, her life began to reorganize itself. Not because she had learned a new technique, but because she had remembered something very ancient, that she was, from the beginning, an extension of the creative force that sustains the entire universe. You are too. You are not someone outside of creation, looking at it from a window and asking to be let in. You are part of creation. You are a conscious expression of the same intelligence that organizes the galaxies and makes the heart beat without you having to think about it. That intelligence is not foreign to you. It is intimate to you, more intimate than your own name. When you begin to live from this understanding, something changes in the way you relate to desires. You no longer chase them. You acknowledge them. You no longer plead with the universe. You align yourself with it. You no longer struggle to deserve. You remember that merit is your birthright. The universe speaks in a silent language made of synchronicities, intuitions, and coincidences that are not coincidences. It speaks through the song that plays exactly when you need to hear it, through the book that falls from a shelf, through the person who appears at the precise moment. But to hear this language, you need to turn down the volume of your inner noise. You need to practice the art of receptive stillness. In the following chapters, you will explore every dimension of this power. You will learn to attune your vibration to the frequency of what you desire. You will learn to speak the language the universe already knows, the language of quiet certainty, of anticipatory gratitude, of self-love as the foundation of all manifestation. But before we continue, it's important to understand something essential. This isn't a path to perfection. It's not about thinking positively 100% of the time or suppressing difficult emotions. It's about cultivating a conscious relationship with your inner world, knowing that this inner world is the seed of your outer world. Clara still goes to the lake, but she won't be asking anymore. She'll be giving thanks. Chapter 1. Practice frequency recording. For the next 7 days, spend 5 minutes each morning sitting in silence before checking your phone or starting your day. In that silence, ask yourself just one question. How am I feeling right now, deep down? Not the answer you want to give, the honest answer. Write it down in a notebook without judgment. At the end of the 7 days, review your notes. You'll notice patterns. These patterns are the secret language your being has been sending out into the universe. The first step to changing it is to see it clearly. Are you enjoying this information? Then don't forget that the first link in the description has more resources to help you continue growing. Chapter 2. The Architecture of Thought. In a city where buildings stood as silent witnesses to time, lived a man named Sebastian, who had been building things with his hands since he was 8 years old. First, there were small wooden boats that he launched on the river. Then, models of imaginary cities that filled the floor of his room. Later, real structures that became homes for other people. Sebastian understood something most people ignore, that no building begins with bricks. It begins with an idea, a plan, an image in the architect's mind that, with enough clarity and determination, eventually becomes something you can touch, inhabit, feel. What Sebastian took many years to understand is that this same principle applies to everything, not just buildings, to life itself. Every reality you experience was first a thought, not necessarily one you had consciously and deliberately. Often, it was a thought repeated so frequently that it became a conviction, and that conviction held, over time, with sufficient emotional intensity, materialized into physical experience. Thought is the architect of reality, not metaphorically, literally. Modern science has begun to confirm what spiritual teachers have taught for millennia. Studies on the placebo effect demonstrate that belief in healing can produce real, measurable, verifiable healing. Research on neuroplasticity shows that repeated thoughts literally reconfigure the brain structure. Quantum physics suggests that the observer influences the observed, that consciousness is not a passive spectator of reality, but an active participant in its creation. You don't need to understand quantum physics to apply this principle, but you do need to understand something simpler and deeper, that what you think with consistency and emotion becomes what you experience. This has two dimensions that are worth exploring carefully. The first is the dimension of conscious thoughts. These are the ones you can directly observe, the ones you have when you plan, when you imagine, when you deliberately focus your attention on something. These thoughts are important, but they are not the most powerful. The second dimension is that of automatic thoughts, beliefs, and mental patterns that operate in the background, like a computer's operating system running in the background while you use other applications. These patterns are usually inherited, learned in childhood, and reinforced by cultural and social repetition. And they are what largely determine what you manifest. Sebastian discovered this when he tried to expand his construction company. He consciously desired growth. He thought about it, planned for it, talked about it. But deep down, a belief inherited from generations of a working-class family that had always lived frugally was at work. That too much money was dangerous, that abundance attracted problems, that it was safer to maintain a moderate level. That belief was more powerful than all his conscious plans. And the universe, true to its nature, delivered exactly what that belief declared. Enough to live on, but never enough to truly thrive. The breaking point came when Sebastian began to notice that pattern, not to fight against it, but to observe it, to understand it, to recognize its origin and, with patience and compassion, begin to replace it with something new. The architecture of thought can be redesigned. The human brain has an extraordinary capacity for adaptation and change, which scientists call neuroplasticity. Thought patterns that have been ingrained for years can be modified with consistent practice, not overnight and not without conscious effort. But it can be done in a completely real and verifiable way. The method Sebastian used was simple yet profound. Every time he noticed the limiting thought at work, he named it. He would say to himself or aloud when he was alone, "There you are. I see you." This simple act of recognition has a powerful effect. It brings the automatic thought out of the darkness of the subconscious and into the light of awareness. And in that light, it loses much of its power. Then, Sebastian would replace it, not with a forced affirmation or a denial of the past, but with a question that opened up possibilities. Instead of saying, "I am abundant," when he didn't believe it, he would ask, "What evidence is there that prosperity can be something natural in my life?" And his mind, true to its nature as a seeker of answers, would begin to find that evidence. This is a crucial distinction. The brain doesn't respond well to statements that directly contradict its accumulated experience, but it responds remarkably well to open-ended questions that invite it to seek new perspectives. A well-formulated question is one of the most powerful tools for mental change. Over time, Sebastian's obstacles began to crumble. The company grew. Opportunities arose, not because the universe had suddenly decided to favor him, but because he had changed the frequency he was emitting. He had redesigned the interior architecture, and the exterior architecture inevitably followed suit. What you construct in your mind with sufficient clarity, detail, and emotion, the universe takes on as a commission. And the universe is the most efficient builder there is. It doesn't waste materials. It doesn't go the wrong way. It delivers exactly what the blueprint indicates. The question you should be asking yourself isn't, "How can I get what I want?" The real question is, what blueprint am I, consciously or unconsciously, surrendering to the architect of the universe? Because until that question has an honest answer, all efforts and techniques will be structures built on unstable foundations. Chapter 2. Practice. The Conscious Architect. Choose an area of your life where you feel the results don't match your effort. It could be relationships, finances, health, creativity, anything. Sit in silence and ask yourself this question. What would I need to believe about myself for this area of my life to work differently? Write down whatever comes up without filtering. Then ask yourself, how much do I truly believe that, on a scale of 1 to 10? The gap between that score and 10 is where the real work of transformation begins. Repeat this reflection for 5 consecutive days. Chapter 3. The Heart as a Compass. There was a kindergarten teacher named Adela who had a peculiar gift. She could tell, before a child uttered a single word, whether that child arrived in the classroom with a heavy or light heart. It wasn't magic. It was sensitivity. Adela had learned, over decades of working with young children, that the body doesn't lie. That a person's emotional state is expressed much more clearly in their posture, their breathing, the brightness or dullness of their eyes, than in any words they could speak. What Adela knew intuitively, science has begun to confirm with precise instruments. The human heart generates an electromagnetic field that extends several meters outside the body. This field changes measurably according to a person's emotional state. When someone experiences sustained positive emotions, such as gratitude, love, or inner peace, the heart's field enters a state that researchers call coherence, an ordered, rhythmic pattern that positively influences brain function, the immune system, and, according to some research, the people and situations nearby. When someone experiences chronic negative emotions, such as fear, anger, or hopelessness, the heart field enters a state of incoherence, an erratic pattern that has adverse effects on physical health, mental clarity, and the quality of experiences they attract. In the language of the law of attraction, the heart is not just an organ that pumps blood. It is the primary transmitter of the frequency you emit to the universe. And emotions are the instructions you give to that transmitter. This understanding radically changes how many people understand manifestation. Most believe the key lies in thoughts, but thoughts without emotional charge are relatively neutral. It is emotions that amplify or negate the power of thought. A thought filled with fear emits a completely different frequency than a thought filled with certainty, even if the words are identical. Adela understood this when she began to apply this principle to her own life beyond the classroom. For years, she had longed to create her own little school, a space where she could teach with complete freedom and creativity. Every time she thought about this dream, she noticed that the thoughts were clear and beautiful. But she also noticed that just beneath them, like a dark underground river, flowed fear. Fear of failure, fear of others' judgment, fear of not being good enough. And that fear was the most powerful instruction she sent out into the universe. The universe, true to the law of correspondence, didn't build the little school. It built circumstances that confirmed it was difficult, that the time wasn't right, that something was always missing. Adela's task was to learn to recognize that fear without fighting it. Because fighting an emotion is also a way of focusing on it, and what you focus on is amplified. Instead, Adela learned to observe fear with the same tenderness with which she looked at her children when they arrived in the classroom with heavy hearts, with compassionate presence, with the certainty that the emotion had something to tell her, but it didn't have to define her. Little by little, instead of allowing fear to be the dominant instruction, Adela deliberately cultivated emotions that vibrated at a higher frequency. Gratitude for the years of experience she had accumulated. Enthusiasm for what she could offer the children. Genuine love for the vocation that had given her so much. These emotions were real, not manufactured, and by consciously cultivating them, they began to become the primary instruction her heart sent out into the field. The difference in their circumstances was gradual but unmistakable. Doors that had once been closed began to open. The right people appeared at the right time. Resources that had seemed impossible became accessible. And the little school, which for years had been just a dream, began its process of becoming a reality. The heart, when it becomes a conscious compass, doesn't lead you where fear says it's safe. It leads you where the soul knows you must go. And the universe honors that kind of quiet courage more than anything else. Learning to use the heart as a compass takes practice. It requires learning to distinguish between the voice of fear and the voice of intuition, between reactive emotion and chosen emotion, between the noise of the ego seeking protection and the whisper of the soul seeking expansion. A practical way to develop this distinction is what Adela called the body test. Before any decision, big or small, she would ask herself the following question: if I had already made this decision and were living with its consequences, how would my body feel? Not her mind, her body. And she would pay attention to the physical response: expansion or contraction, lightness or weight, openness or closure. The body, imbued with the accumulated wisdom of millions of years of evolution, knows things that the rational mind cannot yet process. Your heart holds within it the map to your fullest life, not a map of easy paths or always beautiful landscapes, a map to what you were given to be in this life. And learning to read it is perhaps the most important skill you can cultivate. Chapter 3. Practice. Tuning the heart. Each night, before going to sleep, place your right hand on the center of your chest. Close your eyes and take 3 slow breaths. Then, recall a moment when you felt completely well, loved, at peace, whole. It doesn't have to have been a grand moment. It can be something as simple as the smell of a favorite food, the voice of a loved one, the feeling of the sun on your skin. Hold that memory long enough to feel the warmth it produces in your chest. What you feel is heart coherence. That is your natural frequency when you are aligned with who you truly are. Consciously cultivate it each night for 21 days and observe what begins to change in your external world. Chapter 4. The Words That Create Worlds. The grandfather of a young woman named Valentina had the habit of talking to plants. He didn't do it out of ritual or superstition. He did it because, according to him, plants listen. And the grandfather's plants were, without a doubt, the most vigorous and beautiful in the entire neighborhood. His neighbors attributed the secret to some special fertilizer, the particular soil in the garden, or simply to luck. The grandfather smiled without correcting them. Valentina inherited that habit, but she also inherited something else, the family tendency to constantly comment on life's difficulties. "Things are really tough," her mother would say. "Money is never enough," an aunt would repeat. "Good things are for lucky people," was a cousin's favorite saying. Valentina grew up immersed in that language of scarcity, and without realizing it, she adopted it as her own. For years, she wondered why her life seemed to confirm those statements exactly. Why money was always tight, why relationships ended, why opportunities slipped through her fingers just when they seemed within reach. She didn't know that the answer lay, to a large extent, in the language she spoke every day. Words are not just sounds. They are structured vibrations that carry information to the quantum field that surrounds us. When you speak, you don't just communicate. You manifest, not metaphorically, literally and energetically. The creative power of the word has been recognized in all of humanity's spiritual traditions. In the biblical Genesis, God did not build the world with his hands. He spoke, and it existed. In Hinduism, the universe arose from the primordial sound Om. In Greek philosophy, the logos, the word, was the organizing principle of all reality. In the Hopi tradition, chants are literally acts of creation. The pattern is universal, because the truth it describes is universal. Valentina's transformation began one day when she overheard a conversation between two people in a cafe. One of them was describing her life with vocabulary so different from anything Valentina knew that for a moment she thought she was speaking from another planet. She didn't say, "I have to do this." She said, "I choose to do this." She didn't say, "I wish I could." She said, "I'm on my way too." She didn't say, "Things never go right for me." She said, "I'm learning what works for me." Each word different, each word carrying a different energy. And the person speaking radiated a quality that Valentina could only describe as a kind of luminous peace. That very day, Valentina began paying attention to her own vocabulary. What she discovered shocked her. She spoke of her life as if she were a victim of circumstance. She constantly used the verb to have to, which implies obligation and resistance. She used always and never in negative contexts. "Something always happens to me. I never get what I want." She described her desires in the uncertain future. "Maybe someday? If only I could. I wish." Changing this vocabulary wasn't easy or immediate, but it was transformative. The first step was learning to notice the words before uttering them, to create a small space between the urge to speak and the act of speaking itself. In that space, consciously choosing the words you wanted to be your instructions to the universe. It wasn't about lying or denying reality. If Valentina was going through a financial hardship, she wasn't pretending everything was perfect. But instead of saying, "I'm broke and I'll never get out of this," she learned to say, "I'm going through a difficult time and I'm finding ways to overcome it." The first statement closes doors. The second opens them. Both are honest, but they describe the same reality from completely different perspectives. Over time, Valentina discovered that her words not only changed how others perceived and responded to her, but also how she perceived herself. This altered self-perception began to change the decisions she made, the actions she took, and the opportunities she recognized. The shift in her vocabulary sparked a spiraling transformation that touched every area of her life. Grandfather, with his loving words to the plants, understood something that science would take decades to prove. Dr. Masaru Emoto spent years photographing water crystals exposed to different words, music, and intentions. Water exposed to words like love and gratitude formed crystals of extraordinary symmetry. Water exposed to words of hate and contempt formed chaotic and unattractive structures. The human body is 70% water. Every word you say to yourself is an Emoto experiment being conducted in real time inside you. The words you tell yourself in private matter as much as, or even more than, those you speak in public. The universe listens most attentively to your inner dialogue because it most accurately reflects your true vibrational state. If your outward words say, everything is fine, but your inner words say, I'm actually afraid and don't trust the process, the universe responds to the inner words. Therefore, working with language has two simultaneous fronts: the external, which is what you express in conversations and out loud, and the internal, which is the tone and content of your inner monologue. Both require attention and care. Valentina eventually understood that talking to plants wasn't the eccentricity of an old man. It was the natural expression of someone who had understood, instinctively or consciously, that words are seeds, that language is a garden, and that the universe is the most fertile soil that exists, ready to germinate with perfect fidelity, everything you sow in it with consistency and passion. Chapter 4. Practice. The Gardener of Language. For a full week, keep a record of the phrases you say most frequently, both out loud and in your inner dialogue. At the end of each day, review that list and ask yourself, are these the instructions I want to give the universe? For each phrase you identify as limiting, write an alternative that describes the same situation from a perspective of openness and possibility. The new phrase doesn't need to be perfectly believable right away. It just needs to open a door instead of closing it. After 7 days, compare your vocabulary from day 1 to day 7. The difference will be the first visible measure of your inner transformation. Chapter 5. The Mirror That Never Lies. There was a tailor in a Mediterranean city named Marcos, who possessed the rarest skill in his trade. He didn't need his clients to be measured twice. With a single glance, he could gauge their body, their bearing, and something more difficult to name, something that had to do with how they inhabited themselves. It wasn't just size that Marcos measured. It was the relationship each person had with their own body, with their own presence in the world. There were clients who arrived physically imposing, but moved as if they wanted to take up as little space as possible. And there were others, small and seemingly ordinary, who filled the room just by walking in. Marcos made clothes for both, but he knew that the most important garment wasn't the one he sewed with needle and thread. It was the one each person wore inside. This insight of Marcos's points to one of the most consistent laws of manifestation. The universe doesn't respond to what you ask for. It responds to who you are. And who you are, in the deepest and most functional sense of that word, is largely determined by how you perceive yourself. Self-perception is the invisible mold into which the universe pours the substance of experiences. If the mold says, I am someone for whom good things are hard-won, the universe honors that statement with perfect fidelity. If the mold says, I am someone through whom grace flows naturally, the universe also honors that. Not because the universe has preferences or plays favorites, but because the law of correspondence is impersonal and precise. As within, so without. But there's a complexity to this principle that few people address with the necessary honesty. Self-perception isn't what you consciously believe about yourself. It's what you believe at the deepest, most automatic, most visceral level of your being. And those deep levels are often composed of layers of past experiences, messages received in childhood, internalized social comparisons, and failures that were interpreted as permanent verdicts on one's own worth. A woman named Renata lived for 40 years with a conviction she had never consciously examined, that she wasn't interesting enough to be truly loved. She didn't know it explicitly. She didn't say it to herself every morning. But that belief operated silently like the source code of a program, determining which situations she perceived as threats, which people she chose as partners, how she interpreted the actions of those around her, and what kind of love she was capable of receiving. Every relationship Renata built confirmed that belief. Not because the men she chose were necessarily insensitive or cruel, but because the dynamic she established, unconsciously but consistently, always reproduced the same pattern. She made herself small. She apologized for her needs. She interpreted the slightest distancing from the other person as evidence that her deepest fear was true. Renata's breaking point came unexpectedly. One day, looking at herself in the bathroom mirror, she didn't see her body, her wrinkles, or her hair. For a moment, she saw something harder to describe. She saw the little girl she had been, the one who had learned very early on to make herself small so as not to bother anyone, so as not to ask for too much, so as not to take up more space than she felt she deserved. And she felt, for the first time in decades, genuine compassion for that little girl. Not pity, not drama, pure compassion. That moment of honest self-compassion was more transformative than any visualization technique Renata had ever practiced. Because it touched the root of the problem, not the surface, the root. What the universe calls your vibrational set point, your habitual adjustment point, doesn't change with positive affirmations applied to unexamined negative beliefs. It's like painting a damp wall. The new paint may look good at first, but the underlying dampness eventually reappears. Real change begins when the dampness is addressed, not when more paint is applied. This doesn't mean you have to spend years in therapy before you can manifest anything. It means that the work of knowing yourself with honesty and compassion is the most powerful spiritual work there is, and that this work has direct and measurable effects on your life experience. Self-perception changes in several ways. One is through the accumulated evidence of new experiences. When you act in ways that contradict a limiting belief and observe different results, the belief begins to weaken. Renata experienced this when, for the first time in her life, she expressed a need directly to her partner without apology or beating around the bush. And he responded with tenderness. That simple moment was more persuasive to her belief system than 1,000 affirmations. Another way is through narrative. The story you tell yourself about your past determines how you project yourself into the future. And that story can be retold, not by altering the facts, but by changing the meaning you attribute to them. The failure that once meant, "I'm not good enough," can be retold as, "That experience taught me exactly what I needed to learn to be who I am today." The universe doesn't have access to your past records. It only has access to the frequency you emit in the present. And that frequency is tinged, colored, modulated by how you perceive yourself now. That's why changing your self-perception is changing the signal. And changing the signal is changing what the universe sends back to you as an echo. Marcos, the tailor, knew it without academic jargon. When a customer walked in, back hunched and eyes downcast, he didn't just measure their body. He did something more subtle. He talked. He asked questions. He listened. And in that conversation, he found a moment to say something honest and specific that the person could believe about themselves. You have hands that say, you know how to work well. There's something about the way you think that's unusual. Not empty flattery, precise observations, and something in the customer changed, even before the garment was finished. The suit Marcos sewed afterward always fit him a little better than the one he would have sewn before that conversation. Because the body he measured afterward wasn't exactly the same body he measured at the beginning. The person had expanded, even if only by a millimeter. And a millimeter in self-perception is a kilometer in manifested reality. Your relationship with yourself sets the limit of what you can receive, not the universe. You. The universe has no scarcity. It has no limits. It doesn't have a list of who deserves what. The only real limit is your capacity to receive what is offered to you. And that capacity is directly determined by how you see yourself, how you value yourself, and how completely you believe you are worthy of the life you desire. Chapter 5. Practice. The archaeology of the mirror. For 5 consecutive days, stand in front of a mirror for 3 minutes each morning. Not to examine your appearance, to look yourself in the eyes, in silence, without judging what you find. The first day may be uncomfortable, the second too. But starting on the 3rd day, something begins to soften. At the end of each session, say aloud a single sentence that begins with the words, "What I value most about myself today is..." Not the most impressive thing, the most honest thing. This practice is not vanity. It is archaeology. You are digging to find the firm ground of your own worth, which has always been there, waiting to be acknowledged. Chapter 6. The vibration that precedes the miracle. In a small northern port, where the wind carried salt and the fishermen knew the sea better than their own hands, there lived a man named Tomas, who, for years, was the best in his community at predicting storms. He had no special instruments or particular scientific knowledge. He had something older and more reliable: sensitivity. He could feel it in his body, in an almost imperceptible change in air pressure, in the way the birds flew, in something he called the smell of the weather, that something was about to change. What Thomas did with the weather, any human being can learn with their own vibrational field. Because before any reality materializes on the physical plane, it exists as vibration, as a possibility in the field, as an energetic pattern that has not yet taken shape. And there is a way to attune oneself to that pre-material dimension of reality, which spiritual teachers have described in different ways throughout the centuries. The concept of vibration is central to all genuine spiritual teaching. It is not a poetic metaphor. It is a fairly literal description of how reality works at its deepest levels. Modern physics tells us that matter, at its most fundamental level, is energy in motion. An atom is mostly empty space traversed by constantly oscillating energy fields. The difference between a stone and water is not one of substance, but of vibration. Nor is the difference between ice and steam. And the difference between a stagnant life and an expanding life also has, at its root, a vibrational nature. Your vibrational state at any given moment is not something abstract and inaccessible. It is completely perceptible if you know where to look. It manifests in the quality of your habitual thoughts, in the emotions that predominate in your daily experience, in the way your body feels upon waking, in the type of conversations you attract, and in the synchronicities that appear or are conspicuously absent. A woman named Isabella discovered this in a way that at first seemed too simple to be true. She was going through one of the most difficult periods of her life. The company she had built over a decade was in serious trouble. An important relationship had ended, and her health was showing signs of failing. In that context, a friend made a suggestion that initially seemed frivolous. Start your day by doing something you genuinely enjoy, even if it's just for 10 minutes. Isabella, more out of desperation than conviction, tried it. The first day, she listened to music she loved while drinking coffee. The second, she spent 10 minutes drawing, something she had abandoned years ago. The third, she called a friend who always made her laugh. Nothing dramatic, nothing expensive, just small, deliberate doses of experiences that uplifted her inner state. What Isabella observed in the following weeks wasn't an instant miracle. It was something more interesting and more teachable. She noticed that on the days she began these small wellness rituals, her mind found solutions more easily. Conversations flowed more smoothly. Opportunities that had always been there began to become visible. Key people appeared at the right time. And he also noticed the opposite. On the days when he skipped those rituals and plunged directly into the urgency of the problems, everything seemed darker, heavier, more closed off. The same objective circumstances produced completely different experiences depending on the vibrational state from which he faced them. This observation has profound implications. It means that the most important work you can do before making any decision, taking any action, or seeking any solution is to raise your vibrational state. Not as a luxury you allow yourself when things are going well, but as a strategic priority to make things even better. Spiritual teachers of all traditions have intuitively understood this. Prayer, meditation, sacred chanting, mindful movement, all are technologies for raising one's vibrational state before facing the day. They are not meaningless rituals. They are the spiritual equivalent of warming up an engine before demanding maximum performance. Thomas, the fisherman, didn't fight the storms. He anticipated them and prepared for them. And when the good weather arrived, he didn't take it for granted. He welcomed it with gratitude and made the most of every moment. He had an active and conscious relationship with the sea conditions because he understood that those conditions determined the quality of his work and his life. Your relationship with your own vibrational state can be equally active and conscious. You can learn to recognize when your vibration is low and what causes it. You can identify the practices, experiences, and thoughts that consistently raise it. And you can develop the discipline to deliberately choose what keeps you in a state of coherence and openness, especially when external circumstances push you in the opposite direction. Because the most beautiful paradox of this principle is this: the moment you most need a high vibration is the moment when circumstances are most pressing down. And the moment it's easiest to maintain it is when things are already going well. Vibrational mastery consists of learning to raise your frequency not only when it's easy, but especially when it's difficult. Isabella learned this lesson. Her company didn't recover overnight, but the quality of her decisions improved. Her creativity returned. Her health responded. And months later, looking back, she could clearly identify the turning point. It wasn't any brilliant strategic move or elegant technical solution. It was the day she started listening to music in the mornings. Sometimes miracles are preceded not by grand gestures or heroic disciplines, but by small acts of self-love that raise the signal high enough for the universe to respond. Chapter 6. Practice. The vibrational thermometer. Create a personal scale from 1 to 10, where 1 represents your lowest possible state, the heaviest, darkest, and most closed off, and 10 represents your highest state, the lightest, most open, and most connected. Every morning, before starting your day, give yourself an honest score. If you're below 6, identify a small, concrete, and achievable action that can raise your state by even 2 points. It could be physical movement, music, connecting with nature, a nourishing conversation, or simply 5 minutes of mindful breathing. Do this for 30 consecutive days. By the end of that month, you'll have a highly personal map of your own vibrational architecture, and you'll know exactly which levers to use to tune into the frequency of miracles. Chapter 7. The Gift of Not Knowing. In a monastery nestled in the mountains, there lived an old monk who was consulted by people who came from far and wide seeking answers. The curious thing was that the old man rarely answered questions directly. When someone arrived with urgency and certainty, seeking confirmation of what they already believed they knew, the old man would serve tea. And he would keep serving it until the cup overflowed. "Why is he doing that?" the visitor asked, surprised. "Because a full cup can't hold any more tea," the old man replied, "and a mind full of certainties can't receive new wisdom." This story is ancient and well known in many traditions, but its practical application in the context of manifestation is less obvious than it seems. Because one of the subtlest and most common obstacles on the path to manifestation is the trap of knowing too precisely how what we desire should happen. There is an essential difference between clarity about the destination and rigidity about the path. The former is necessary, even indispensable. Without clarity about what you wish to create, the universe has no destination toward which to send its resources. But rigidity about the exact path to take, the people to be involved, the timing, and the precise form it should take. That rigidity is, paradoxically, one of the greatest obstacles to the flow of manifestation. An architect named Valentina spent months mentally planning the exact path her most ambitious project would take. She knew which client should come first. She knew which contact should make the connection. She knew in which month everything should happen. And with each passing week that didn't materialize that exact plan, her anxiety grew and her frequency decreased. What Valentina couldn't see from her position was that the universe had access to a vastly broader network of possibilities than she could see from her inevitably limited human perspective. The path she had so meticulously designed was just one among thousands of possible paths leading to the same destination. Some of those paths were more efficient, richer in valuable experiences, and better suited to her personal development than the one she had chosen. But by being so focused on her specific version, she blocked her ability to recognize and take advantage of the other paths the universe was trying to show her. It's like having your eyes glued to the GPS screen without noticing the extraordinary scenery passing by outside the window. The gift of not knowing is not an invitation to passivity or aimlessness. It is an invitation to hold the clarity of destiny with open hands instead of closed fists. To declare firmly, "This is what I wish to create," and then add with genuine openness, "and I am willing to be surprised by how it unfolds." This second part of the statement is what changes everything, because it opens up a field of possibilities beyond the limits of individual imagination. And the universe, which operates with an intelligence that far transcends human understanding, can then work with a freedom it didn't have when it was confined to Valentina's detailed plan. A man named Rodrigo understood this principle viscerally when he lost the job he'd held for 15 years. His first reaction was to urgently search for another job exactly like it in the same industry. He had that vision very clearly. He needed that specific path because it was the only one he knew. But the doors to that industry remained closed for months. And in the desperation of that wait, Rodrigo began to explore territories he would never have considered if the usual path had been available. He started teaching what he knew. He discovered he had a gift for teaching that he had never recognized. He found in that activity a satisfaction he had never experienced in 15 years of corporate work. Today, Rodrigo runs a vocational training school. He earns more than in his previous job. He has more freedom. He feels he's doing exactly what he came here to do. And none of that would have happened if the path he had planned had worked out. The universe knew. That's why it closed that door. Not as punishment, but as guidance. Rodrigo only understood it in retrospect, but that understanding forever changed his relationship with the concept of an obstacle. Obstacles aren't always signs that you're wrong. Sometimes they're signs that the universe has something better in mind and is trying to redirect you. The ability to distinguish between the two requires stillness, honesty, and a genuine willingness to accept that you don't know better than the universe how your story should unfold. The old man at the monastery wasn't emptying the visitor's cup to humiliate him. He was doing it to liberate him. Because only a partially empty cup can receive something new. Only a mind that maintains a space of not knowing can receive the guidance that the countryside constantly offers to those who are willing to listen. In practical terms, cultivating the gift of not knowing means learning to be comfortable with uncertainty without becoming paralyzed. It means setting clear intentions without clinging to specific outcomes. It means celebrating closed doors with the same openness as open ones, knowing that both are part of the same loving intelligence that guides the way. It also means developing the ability to ask open-ended questions instead of seeking confirmation of what you already believe. What's the best thing that could happen here? Instead of, why isn't what I expect happening? What am I learning from this situation? Instead of, when will this end? Open-ended questions connect you to the realm of possibility. Closed-ended questions remain in the realm of control. Chapter 7. Practice. Open hand. Prayer. Each morning, after clearly stating what you wish to manifest or the area of life in which you wish to see changes, add this phrase aloud or silently. I am open to receiving this or something better, in whatever way the universe deems most appropriate for my highest good. Not as a magic formula, as a genuine willingness. Then, throughout the day, practice noticing 3 things you hadn't planned, but that turned out to be valuable. An unexpected encounter, an idea that came out of nowhere, a solution that came from an unforeseen direction. Write these 3 things down each night. You are training your perception to recognize the intelligence of the universe operating outside the realm of your control. I'd like to take this opportunity to tell you that if what you see here resonates with you, you'll find much more material to continue learning in the first link in the description. Chapter 8. The Sacred Time of Sowing. On the southern plains, where the seasons dictate the rhythm of life with a precision no human calendar could surpass, lived a farmer named Esperanza, who knew a secret her younger neighbors took years to grasp, that there is a time to sow, a time to water, a time to wait, and a time to harvest. And that confusing these times is the most costly mistake a farmer can make. Esperanza had learned from her grandmother that the most common mistake impatient farmers made was digging up seeds to check if they were growing. The very act of digging them up, driven by the anxiety of checking progress, interrupted the process they were trying to verify. The seed needs darkness, silence, and time to germinate. The field of manifestation has exactly the same needs. There is a dimension in the law of attraction that very few modern teachings address with the depth it deserves. The dimension of sacred time. The time that elapses between the odd moment and intention is clearly and emotionally planted in the quantum field, and the moment that intention materializes in physical experience is not empty. It is not a passive waiting period. It is an active process of gestation that occurs in dimensions that the rational mind cannot directly observe. A young man named Matteo learned this the hard way, through impatience. He had begun practicing visualization with genuine enthusiasm and a faith that surprised even himself. The first few weeks were remarkable. Small synchronicities began to appear, signs that told him he was on the right track. And then, when the big manifestation he had been waiting for didn't arrive within his expected time frame, his faith wavered. Matteo began to doubt, then to question, then to abandon the practices. And with each round of doubt, he interrupted the gestation process that was already underway. He was exactly like the impatient farmer digging up his seeds, unaware that what he would find upon excavating would not be evidence of failure, but a root in the process of formation that would have needed only a little more time and darkness to emerge on its own. The sacred time of sowing requires a particular kind of faith that is neither blind nor naive. It is a faith informed by an understanding of how the process works. The sower does not doubt his seeds because he does not see them grow. He trusts the process because he knows the law. He knows that underground, precisely the processes that must occur are taking place, even though they are invisible from the surface. Similarly, when you plant an intention with clarity, emotion, and openness, and then release it into the care of the universal field, you don't need to see it to trust that it's being processed. Trust isn't passively waiting, gazing at the horizon. It's continuing with your life, continuing to be the person you've chosen to be, continuing to act from the frequency of someone who has already received what they asked for, without the anxiety of someone who fears it won't arrive. Esperanza had a practice she passed on to all the young people who learned from her. After sowing, she would walk through the field giving thanks, not for what she could already see, but for what she knew was happening underground. Thank you, because these seeds are already on their way, she would say. Thank you because the earth does its work, even though I can't see it. Thank you because the harvest is already real, at the level where things are created before they appear. This practice of anticipatory gratitude is one of the most powerful tools in the conscious manifestor's arsenal. Because gratitude, as we've seen, operates at a frequency of abundance. And abundance is the frequency the universe needs to receive from you in order to give you more of that which produces it. But anticipatory gratitude has an additional ingredient that makes it especially powerful. It involves active faith. When you give thanks for something you can't yet see, you're declaring to the universe that you trust the process enough to celebrate before the evidence. That declaration of trust is one of the clearest signs of alignment you can give. Years after his period of impatience and doubt, Matteo developed what he called the sower's protocol. Every time he planted an intention, he performed 3 deliberate acts. First, he declared it clearly and charged it emotionally with anticipatory gratitude. Second, he took the most immediate and obvious action within his power, the one that was consistent with what he was sowing. Third, and this was the most difficult and the most powerful, he tended to his own inner field. He cultivated his peace. He kept his vibration high. He cared for the quality of the soil in which he had sown. Because another truth that farmers know well is this: The seed may be perfect, but if the soil is poor, barren, or toxic, the seed will not thrive. The soil of manifestation is your inner field, your habitual emotional state, the quality of your dominant thoughts, the consistency between what you say you want and what you believe you deserve. Cultivating that field, while patiently awaiting the germination of what you've sown, is the most important and least glamorous work on the spiritual path. It lacks the exciting immediacy of a new technique and the drama of a sudden revelation. But it is the work that distinguishes those who manifest consistently from those who do so sporadically. Esperanza lived to be 92. Her last fields were the most productive of her entire life. Not because she had learned more sophisticated techniques, because she had dedicated decades to knowing the land, to respecting its rhythms, to trusting the process with the profound understanding of someone who knows that patience is not passivity. It is the most active and loving way to participate in creation. Chapter 8. Practice. The letter to the harvest. Write a letter to your future self, to that you who has already manifested what you are sowing today. Write it in the present tense, as if it were already a reality. Describe how that achievement feels, what the morning smells like when you experience that reality, what you think when you wake up. What does your body do differently when it walks through the world from that place of abundance, love, health, or peace that you are cultivating? When you finish, fold the letter and keep it somewhere you don't see it often. Do this without attachment to the immediate result. You know that you sowed with clarity and love. Trust that the field will do what the field knows how to do. Chapter 9. The current of giving. In an old neighborhood where the houses huddled together like old friends, lived a woman named Aurora, who had the most peculiar habit on her block. Whenever she received something good, whatever its nature or size, the first thing she did wasn't to keep it to herself or celebrate it privately. Instead, she found a way to pass it on to someone else. It wasn't philanthropy in the institutional sense. It wasn't a calculated gesture to gain social recognition. It was something more instinctive and deeper. Aurora had understood viscerally that the energy of abundance is not static. It moves. And when it stops at a single point, when it is dammed by fear or mental scarcity, it loses its nature and begins to corrupt, like water that stops flowing and stagnates. The principle of circulation is one of the most misunderstood in popular teachings on the law of attraction. Many people approach manifestation with an accumulation mindset. I want to draw more to myself. I want to attract, retain, and preserve. And this mindset, while understandable, given the fear of scarcity that permeates our culture, works against the natural flow of abundance. Think about the circulatory system of the human body. The heart doesn't pump blood to accumulate it on the left side and keep it there. It pumps it forward, knowing it will return, enriched from the right side. If at any point in the system the blood were to stop flowing, if a vessel were to become blocked and circulation were interrupted, the consequence wouldn't be more abundance at the point of blockage. It would be disease, and eventually, death of the tissue that stops receiving what it needs. Spiritual economics works the same way. Genuine giving doesn't diminish what you have. It activates the flow that brings you more. Not as a calculated exchange where you give to receive, but as an expression of trust that the supply is infinite and that your participation in the flow naturally places you within that infinity. A man named Lorenzo had built a small bakery business through hard work and a very narrow-minded approach. Every loaf sold was counted, every expense analyzed twice, every penny of profit anxiously hoarded. Not because he was greedy, but because in his personal history, Scarcity had been so real and so frequent that his mind had developed a constant vigilance around money. The problem was that this vigilance, energetically speaking, emitted a scarcity signal that the universe responded to with more scarcity. Lorenzo worked hard, and the business survived, but it never prospered. There was always an unexpected problem that consumed what had been accumulated. A situation always arose that drained the surplus as soon as it began to form. One day, a friend suggested something that seemed irrational to Lorenzo: that he give, that he find a way to circulate something of value with no guarantee of return. Lorenzo, though skeptical, was desperate enough to try. He started with what he knew: bread. Every week, he set aside the loaves that would have been thrown away at the end of the day and took them to a family in the neighborhood who were going through hard times. Nothing changed in the first week, nor in the second. Lorenzo was waiting for the accounting miracle that would instantly transform his business. And when he didn't see it, he almost gave up on the practice. But something different was changing. Something within him. The experience of giving without calculating the return began to loosen his grip on scarcity. He began to feel, very gradually, that he lived in a world where it was possible to give and not be left with nothing, where sharing wasn't losing. That inner shift, that openness that began to replace the chronic repression surrounding money, was what changed the frequency Lorenzo was emitting. And the universe, responding to that new frequency, began to send resources through channels Lorenzo hadn't anticipated. A contract with a local restaurant, an opportunity to cater corporate events, a larger venue that appeared with accessible financing. In less than 2 years, Lorenzo's bakery tripled in size, not because he had learned better business techniques, although he had, but because he had corrected the fundamental block that prevented the flow of goods. The belief that giving diminishes and that the universe has finite quantities to distribute. Aurora, the woman from the old quarter, knew it intuitively. When someone asked her how she could give so easily when she herself wasn't rich, she always answered the same thing: I give because I know there is enough. And because I know there is enough, there is always enough. This is the heart of the principle. Giving doesn't come after abundance, as if it were a luxury you allow yourself when you already have more than enough. Giving is what creates the internal conditions for abundance. It's the signal you send to the universe that you've understood the law, that you don't operate from a fear of scarcity, but from a confidence in sufficiency. And the universe, which responds to signals, adjusts its response accordingly. Giving doesn't mean destroying yourself in sacrifice or emptying yourself until you have nothing left. It means acting from a place of abundance rather than lack. It means participating in the flow with the awareness that you are part of a self-regulating and self-sustaining system when all its components are functioning correctly. What you give doesn't have to be money. It can be time, genuine attention, knowledge, energy, words of encouragement, loving presence. The substance of the gift matters less than the frequency from which it is given. A small act of genuine generosity is worth infinitely more than a large donation made out of calculation or obligation. Chapter 9. Practice. Daily flow. For 21 days, give something every day. Not the same thing, not in the same way. Vary the form, the recipient, the substance. One day, it might be listening attentively to someone who needs to be heard. Another, sharing knowledge you have with someone who needs it. Another, offering your time or help without being asked. When you give, do so with the explicit awareness that you are participating in the flow of universal abundance. Not as a performance or a technique, as a genuine expression of trust that the universe is a system of sufficiency, and that your participation in it activates the laws that govern the abundant return of everything given from love. Chapter 10. The Inner Sanctuary. In a city that never truly slept, where traffic lights blinked until dawn and the engines of delivery trucks punctuated the early morning hours, lived a man named Esteban, who had spent 40 years believing that peace was a destination. A place one reached when problems ended, debts were paid, children were settled, work was fulfilling, and the body felt no pain. Esteban awaited peace like one awaits a delayed flight, sitting, watching the clock, calculating how much longer it would take. Peace never came that way, and Esteban reached the age of 58 with the bitter feeling that he had been cheated by a promise the world had made him, a promise the world had never kept. The breaking point came one winter night in a traffic jam that lasted 2 hours. Esteban was in his car, surrounded by honking horns and red lights, his body tense and his mind ruminating on a difficult conversation he'd had that afternoon. And then, for no apparent reason, in the midst of that perfectly mundane chaos, something inside him stilled. Not the circumstances. His inner world stopped like water in a pond when the wind dies down. In that moment of unexpected stillness, Esteban understood something that would change the rest of his life. That peace is not a destination. It is a dimension that has always been available within him, waiting for him to stop looking for it outside and start finding it inside. This understanding is the foundation of one of the most transformative principles on the spiritual path. The inner sanctuary is not a relaxation technique or a stress management strategy. It is the recognition that at the center of every human being exists a space of stillness that cannot be touched by external circumstances. Teachers have called it by different names across cultures and centuries. Buddhism calls it the witnessing mind. The Christian tradition calls it the inner kingdom. Transpersonal psychology calls it the observing self. But they all point to the same thing, that place within you that can witness the storm without becoming it. Accessing that sanctuary doesn't require special conditions or perfect circumstances. It requires practice. And the most direct and accessible practice is also the oldest: conscious silence. A woman named Beatrice had lived her entire life surrounded by noise. Not just the physical noise of a large family and a demanding job, but the inner noise of a mind that never stopped. Her thoughts were like a radio that never turned off, jumping from one frequency to another without rest, replaying past conversations, rehearsing future ones, analyzing, judging, planning, fearing. Beatrice came to meditation on the advice of her doctor. Exhausted from seeing her every month, with physical symptoms clearly stemming from chronic tension, he told her more frankly than usual, "What you need isn't in any bottle. You need to learn to be still." The first few weeks of practice were, in Beatrice's own words, a gentle torture. Sitting in silence for 10 minutes revealed with disturbing clarity how much noise resided within her. Every thought demanded attention. Every impulse to get up, check her phone, or do something productive was an urgent voice arguing that silence was a waste of time. But Beatrice persevered, not out of heroic discipline, but because at some point during the third week, between one thought and the next, she found a space. Small, brief, barely perceptible, but real. A moment when there was no thought, only awareness, only pure presence without content. And that moment, though it lasted less than a second, contained a quality of peace that Beatrice had never experienced or sought outside, because she had never imagined it could be found within. That moment was their point of no return. Over time, those spaces between thoughts widened. The daily practice of silence became the axis around which everything else revolved. Not because Beatrice had become a Buddhist or abandoned her active life, but because she had discovered that bringing that inner sanctuary into her daily activities completely changed the quality of them all. The inner sanctuary has direct and profound implications for manifestation. Because when the mind is constantly noisy, when thoughts race endlessly and emotions follow one another without space for observation, the vibrational field you emit is chaotic and inconsistent. You send contradictory signals to the universe. I desire this, but I fear that. I want to change, but I also cling to the familiar. I trust the process, but I also need to control it. That inconsistency isn't the universe playing tricks on you. It's a true reflection of your inner state. The universe can't give you coherence if you don't inhabit it yourself. In contrast, when you regularly cultivate access to your inner sanctuary, when you learn to operate from that space of observant stillness, even amidst activity, your vibrational field acquires a coherence that is perceptible to the universe. The signals you emit become clearer. Your intentions land with greater precision. The inner guidance, always available but inaudible in the noise, becomes progressively clearer. The moments of greatest spiritual clarity in human history, revelations, inspirations, solutions to seemingly unsolvable problems, almost invariably occur in states of stillness. Not because silence is magical, but because in stillness, the interference that normally blocks the reception of what is always being transmitted ceases. Esteban, the man from the traffic jam, began meditating 3 months after that night. Not dramatically, nor with grand rituals. 15 minutes every morning before the day demanded it. Over time, those 15 minutes became the most important act of his day. Not because what happened during them was always profound or transcendent. Sometimes it was simply 15 minutes of observing thoughts drift by like clouds. But the accumulated practice changed something fundamental in his relationship with reality. Esteban became less reactive. Situations that once destabilized him for hours now affected him for minutes. The gap between stimulus and response, that space where Viktor Frankl located human freedom, began to widen. And in that expanding space, Esteban discovered he had options he hadn't previously perceived. He could choose how to respond instead of simply reacting. He could choose which thoughts to nurture and which to let go. He could choose the frequency he inhabited instead of being inhabited by the frequency of circumstances. That is the inner sanctuary in its most practical function. Not a refuge where one can escape from life, but the point of equilibrium from which one can live life with greater presence, clarity, and creative power. And the universe responds to that clarity with a precision that those who experience it always describe with the same words. Things began to flow. Not because circumstances became easier, but because they became more fluid within them. Chapter 10. Practice. The threshold of silence. Choose a fixed time each day, preferably in the morning, to spend 10 to 20 minutes in mindful silence. Not necessarily silence from external noise, but inner silence. No phone, no music, nothing to consume your attention. Sit comfortably, close your eyes, and focus your attention on the physical sensation of your breath. When a thought arises, and many will, simply notice it without following it. Imagine it's a ship passing on the horizon. You see it. You don't get on board. Gently return to your breath. This practice, sustained for 40 days without exception, produces a transformation in the quality of your inner field that no external technique can replicate. The sanctuary is always open. You only need to remember where the door is. Chapter 11. The Alchemy of the Obstacle. There is a question that almost no one asks when starting the path of conscious manifestation, but that sooner or later everyone is forced to face. What do I do when what I manifest is not what I wanted, but exactly the opposite? This question has the power to destroy a practitioner's faith or to radically deepen it, depending on the answer they find. And the answer offered by superficial teachings, that if something bad happens, it's because you thought negatively, is not only insufficient, but actively harmful. It burdens the seeker with a paralyzing guilt that obscures true understanding. The most honest answer, the one that emerges from a deeper understanding of how the universe operates, requires completely reframing what an obstacle means. A man named Ernesto had dedicated 2 years to building a project that embodied everything he had ever dreamed of, a social enterprise that combined his passion for education with his desire for community impact. He had done everything the masters of manifestation recommend. He had visualized with clarity and passion, acted consistently, and maintained an attitude of anticipatory gratitude. And then, just as the project seemed closest to taking off, a perfect storm of simultaneous obstacles arrived and nearly brought it down completely. Ernesto's first reaction was the most human of all: despair. This was closely followed by self-blame. What did I do wrong? Where did I fail? These understandable and almost inevitable questions trapped him for weeks in a mental labyrinth from which he could not escape. The turning point came when a mentor she consulted asked her a different question. Not, what did you do wrong? But, what is this situation trying to show you that you couldn't have seen if it had gone as planned? That question opened a door that Ernesto hadn't been able to see. Examining the project's collapse through this new lens, he uncovered several things that the illusion of success had obscured. He discovered that 2 of his key partners, whom he trusted, had agendas incompatible with the original vision. He discovered that the financial model he had designed had a structural vulnerability that would have emerged anyway, but at a more costly and delayed pace. And he discovered, perhaps most importantly, that his motivation for creating the project was intertwined with a need for external validation, which, had it been satisfied by premature success, would have hindered the inner growth he had sought. Obstacles, viewed from the broader perspective of universal intelligence, are not interruptions to the path. They are part of the path. They are the path refining the traveler. There is a phenomenon in nature called eustress, which biologists carefully distinguish from distress. While distress is stress that damages, eustress is stress that strengthens. Muscles grow through resistance, not in spite of it. Bone becomes denser under the pressure of weight. Trees develop deeper roots when constantly challenged by the wind. Without resistance, there is no growth. And the laws of the universe make no exceptions for human beings, who prefer to grow without resistance. This doesn't mean you should seek out suffering or passively resign yourself to any difficulty. It means that when an obstacle appears, the first question you choose to ask yourself determines whether that obstacle crushes you or lifts you up. Why is this happening to me? Is a closing question. It places the questioner in the position of victim and the obstacle in the position of aggressor. It has no productive answer. What can this teach me? Is an open-ended question. It places the questioner in the position of learner and the obstacle in the position of teacher. It has infinite productive answers. An artist named Catalina spent 3 years trying to break into the commercial art world with a style that, while technically impeccable, couldn't find its niche. Gallery doors closed politely but consistently. Proposals to companies went nowhere. The feeling of invisibility, so common among artists, began to weigh heavily on her, threatening to extinguish something essential within her. One day, forced by financial reasons, Catalina began teaching drawing to children. It wasn't what she wanted to do. It was what she could do. And in that makeshift classroom with children aged 8 to 12, who painted without inhibition or fear of judgment, something unexpected happened. Catalina rediscovered her own original relationship with art, the one she had had before the world began to evaluate her. That experience unleashed something in her work. Her creations changed. They gained in expression what they perhaps lost in technical perfection. And that change was exactly what the galleries that had previously rejected her needed to see. In 18 months of teaching children, Catalina found her true artistic voice. And that voice did find its audience. The obstacle that seemed to keep her from her destiny was in reality the path that led her to it. Ernesto, after rebuilding his project with the wisdom gained from its collapse, went further than he would have with the original plan. Not because the universe had rewarded him for his patience, but because he had grown to the stature the project required. The alchemy of the obstacle doesn't work on its own. It requires an alchemist. Someone willing to look at the lead of the difficulty and ask, with genuine curiosity and without defeatist resignation, where is the gold in this? That question is the catalyst, and the universe, which never wastes anything, always has an answer. Chapter 11. Practice. The Alchemist's Journal. Identify a current obstacle in your life, something that is resisting, blocking, or frustrating you. On a blank page, right at the top, what this obstacle is teaching me is. Then, write non-stop for 10 minutes, without editing or judging what comes up. Let the pen think. When you finish, look through what you wrote for the most uncomfortable answer, the one that asks you to change something you'd rather not make. That is probably the truest one. On another page, write what you would do differently if you believed with absolute certainty that this obstacle was specifically designed to prepare you for something better. That second page is your alchemy map. Chapter 12. The Grammar of Gratitude. There is a word in Sanskrit, mudita, that doesn't have a perfect translation in most Western languages. The closest approximation would be sympathetic joy, or joy at the well-being of others. But neither of those phrases fully captures the experience it describes. A genuine, expansive joy unmixed with envy at the good fortune of another being. Buddhist teachers consider mudita one of the 4 immeasurable attitudes, one of the highest and most transformative states of mind a human being can cultivate. And what is remarkable for the purpose of this chapter is that mudita does not only transform the one who experiences it, it measurably and consistently transforms the quality of what that person attracts to themselves. This introduces us to one of the deepest dimensions of gratitude, which goes far beyond simply giving thanks for the good things you already have. Superficial gratitude is an inventory of the positive, useful but limited. Deep gratitude is something qualitatively different. It is a state of being, a fundamental orientation toward reality that recognizes the value and perfection of every experience, including the difficult ones, including those that have not yet materialized and that are held in the heart as certainties before becoming evidence. A school teacher named Daniela had been keeping a gratitude journal for years. She did it with discipline, but also with a certain automaticity that, without her noticing, had drained much of its power from the practice. Every night she wrote down the same categories of things: health, family, shelter, work. They were truly valuable things. But the act of writing them down had become so routine that her nervous system no longer responded to it. It was gratitude of the head, not of the heart. The change came one day when Daniela, more by accident than intention, spent 15 minutes watching her 6-year-old daughter discover ants in the garden for the first time. The girl was completely absorbed. For her, that ant colony was the most amazing spectacle in the universe. And Daniela, watching her, began to see the ants through her daughter's eyes. She felt something that can only be described as wonder. A pure wonder, without sophistication, without the filter of adult knowledge that classifies, categorizes, and overlooks. That wonder was gratitude in its purest form. Not gratitude as a response to something extraordinary. Gratitude as recognition of the ordinary miracle that exists in every moment of existence. Daniela transformed her practice. Instead of taking stock of the positive, she began practicing what she called contemplation of the everyday miracle. Each day, she would choose just one thing, often something very small and seemingly trivial, and contemplate it with her full attention. The steam rising from her coffee cup in the morning, the sound of rain on the roof, the way the light changes in her kitchen between 6 and 7 in the evening. What she discovered was that this practice produced a distinctive physical response in her body, a feeling of opening in her chest, a softening of the usual tension in her shoulders, a quality of presence that was completely different from that of routine gratitude. And the external consequences of that internal state soon became visible. Daniela began to attract into her life a quality of experiences that corresponded exactly to the quality of presence she was cultivating. Not because the universe had changed its mind about her, but because she had changed the frequency from which she related to the universe. Genuine gratitude, felt in the body and not just thought about in the mind, operates on a frequency we might call fullness. And fullness is, paradoxically, the mental and emotional state that most effectively activates the flow of abundance. Not because fullness is a technique for attracting things, but because fullness is the truth. The universe, in its deepest nature, is abundant. And when you tune into that abundance through genuine gratitude, you simply align yourself with what already is. There is also a dimension of gratitude that deserves special attention: anticipatory gratitude. It's the capacity to feel genuine appreciation for something that hasn't yet arrived, but that you hold in your heart as a certainty. This practice is more difficult than gratitude for what already exists, because it requires the emotional system to respond to a reality that is not yet perceptible to the senses. But it is also much more powerful because it declares to the universe a trust that is not contingent on evidence. And that unconditional trust is the clearest sign of alignment a human being can emit. A writer named Hector practiced it during the darkest period of his creative life, when he had gone months without being able to write a single line that satisfied him. Instead of lamenting his writer's block, he began each morning with a sentence he initially struggled to utter with conviction. "Thank you that the words I need already exist and are finding their way to me." The sentence was uncomfortable because it didn't feel true, but Hector uttered it anyway, searching his body for any trace of the corresponding emotion, however small. After 3 weeks, something loosened. Not dramatically, like untying a knot you've been working on for a while. Suddenly, without having noticed exactly when it gave way, the words returned, and with them, a quality of writing that Hector had never had before his writer's block. The lockdown had been the price of admission to a deeper level, and anticipated gratitude had been the key. There is also a third dimension of gratitude that connects with the principle of mudita, with which we began this chapter. Gratitude for the good fortune of others. Genuinely rejoicing in the success, joy, and prosperity of other people without any mixture of comparison or envy is one of the most powerful spiritual acts available to humankind. Because envy and comparison operate on a frequency of scarcity. At their deepest core, they involve the belief that the good another possesses diminishes the good available to you. And that belief in scarcity is precisely what attracts more scarcity. The mudita, genuine joy for the good fortune of others, operates on the opposite frequency. It implies the understanding that goodness is infinite, that the prosperity of another does not diminish, but rather confirms the abundance available to all, including yourself. And this understanding attunes the vibrational field to the frequency of abundance, which then manifests in your own experience. Gratitude, in all its dimensions, is not just another spiritual practice. It is the native language of the awakened soul. And the universe, which speaks that language with perfect fluency, responds to those who speak it with a generosity that always surpasses what the logical mind could have calculated. Chapter 12. Practice. The 3 layers of gratitude. Each night before sleep, practice gratitude in 3 distinct layers. The first layer, give thanks for something concrete and already present in your life. Something small and everyday that you usually overlook. Take enough time to feel the gratitude in your body, not just think about it. The second layer, give thanks in advance for something you wish to manifest, as if it has already arrived. Look in your body for the emotion corresponding to that imagined reality. The third layer, give thanks for the well-being of someone close to you, someone whose prosperity or joy you can genuinely celebrate. Hold that celebration until it produces warmth in your chest. These 3 layers, practiced each night for a month, profoundly reconfigure the nervous system's relationship with abundance. Chapter 13. The Art of Letting Go. Without giving up. On the outskirts of a coastal city stood a lighthouse that had guided ships through the darkest nights and fiercest storms for decades. The lighthouse keeper, a man named Manuel, had developed over the years a philosophy that he applied to both his work and his life. His job was to keep the light burning and pointing in the right direction. What the ships did with that light was not his concern. He couldn't control the currents. He couldn't control the wind. He couldn't control the captain's decisions. He could only control the light. Manuel found in this reality not a limitation, but a liberation. Because when he understood that his responsibility was to guide the light and not the fate of each ship, he was able to fulfill his role with a tranquility and dedication that would otherwise have been impossible. This image of the lighthouse keeper is perhaps the most accurate metaphor for one of the most difficult and transformative principles on the path of manifestation. The art of letting go without giving up. Letting go is not the same as giving up. This distinction is fundamental and deserves careful examination, because confusing the two leads to one of the most frequent mistakes among those who practice conscious manifestation. Giving up is the retreat born of discouragement. It's the response of the wounded ego, which concludes that the effort is pointless because the results aren't forthcoming. It's the oscillation between intense attachment and utter disillusionment, between clinging and rejection, neither of which has anything to do with genuine trust in the process. Letting go, on the other hand, is the act of liberation of the soul that has grasped the mechanism. It is maintaining clarity about the destination while releasing anxiety about the path. It is holding the intention with open hands instead of closed fists. It is the difference between the navigator who knows their destination and trusts the current and the shipwrecked person who clings to a piece of wood in the panic of not knowing where they are going. A businesswoman named Sophia had spent 3 years in the first category without realizing it. She had a clear vision for her company, had built a solid team, and had made the right decisions at the right times. But she carried that vision like a burden. She thought about it constantly. She reviewed it obsessively. She couldn't have a conversation with someone in her industry without assessing whether that person could be useful to her plans. She couldn't rest for a weekend without the anxiety of not moving fast enough, poisoning her peace. The exhaustion this attitude produced was evident. What wasn't so obvious was that this constant anxiety, this need for total control over the process, was creating a frequency of contraction that actively limited the possibilities the universe was trying to present to him. Because the universe operates with an intelligence that requires space to work. It cannot reveal the most efficient path when the path is already rigidly defined. It cannot orchestrate the necessary synchronicities when the mind is so busy calculating that it cannot receive signals. It cannot bring the right people to the right path when all energy is focused on forcing available people into the roles the plan requires. The turning point for Sophia came in a way she couldn't have planned. One afternoon, in a moment of genuine exhaustion, she stopped working. Not strategically. She simply collapsed. She sat on the floor of her office, leaned her back against the wall, and her mind went blank for 20 minutes. She didn't think about the company. She didn't plan. She was simply there, with no agenda. And in that void, in that space she hadn't planned, but which had been imposed upon her by the very limits of her strength, an idea emerged that was so clear and so perfect for one of her company's most persistent problems, that Sophia sat up and wrote it down immediately. An idea that, looking back, was exactly what the project needed, and that would never have arisen from all the anxious thinking that had preceded it. The universe had been trying to deliver that solution for weeks, but Sophia's mind, so full of her own plans, had no room to receive it. This illustrates one of the most delicate and powerful principles of manifestation. The space of letting go is not empty. It is receptive. It is the territory where the universe can do its part of the work, which is the part you cannot do no matter how hard you try, the part that involves synchronizing factors, people, and times that are completely outside your control and completely within the control of the intelligence that organizes the cosmos. But letting go isn't just a mental act. It's an emotional and physical one. The human body carries the tension of control in specific places: a clenched jaw, raised shoulders, a compressed chest, a rigid abdomen. When the body is in this state of chronic tension, it emits an alarm signal that the body interprets as urgency, as lack, as danger. And this signal activates protective responses instead of responses of abundance. Learning to let go also involves learning to relax the body deliberately and consistently. Contemplative practices, mindful movement, deep breathing, and connecting with nature are all ways of telling the nervous system, we are safe. We can open up. We can receive. Manuel, the lighthouse keeper, kept his body calm, even on the stormiest nights. Not because he was insensitive to the storm, but because he knew that panic didn't help any ship. What helped was keeping the light burning and the keeper's serene demeanor. That serenity was his most valuable contribution to the process. Yours too. No ship reaches port any faster because the lighthouse keeper is anxious. No manifestation arrives sooner because you hold on to it with tension. The universe doesn't respond to urgency by accelerating the process. It responds to confidence by expanding the possibilities. Sophia learned to have what she called surrender meetings with herself. Once a week, she would sit down with her journal and write down everything she was trying to control in relation to her business. Then, item by item, she would practice a simple statement. I surrender this to the process. I do my part. I trust the rest. It wasn't a resignation. It was a clear delineation of responsibilities between her will and the intelligence of the universe. Over time, Sophia developed a skill that spiritual teachers have described in many ways, but which she described in simple terms. She could tell, at any given moment, whether she was acting from inspiration or from fear. Inspiration produces actions that flow, that energize even when demanding, that align with something greater than the ego's plan. Fear produces actions that feel necessary but are draining, that seek to control the uncontrollable, that remain in familiar territory even when familiar territory no longer works. Acting from inspiration, received in spaces of stillness and letting go and leaving the rest to the universe. That is the lighthouse keeper's formula. The light is yours. The direction of the ships belongs to the universe. Chapter 13. Practice the ceremony of letting go. Once a week, preferably during a quiet moment at the end of the week, write down everything you're trying to control regarding your desires and manifestation processes. Be honest and specific. Then, read each item aloud, and after each one say, "I do my part with dedication and love." The rest I surrender to the process, which is wiser than my plan. When you finish the list, fold the paper and put it in a drawer without opening it again until the following week. This physical act of putting the paper away is a symbolic gesture that the body understands, and that helps anchor letting go in the physical realm where tension resides. The following week, before writing the new list, read the previous one. You'll notice that many of the things you were trying to control resolved themselves or progressed without your direct intervention. Chapter 14. The Geometry of Perfect Time. In a village surrounded by centuries-old olive groves lived a woman named Consuelo, who had learned from her grandmother a truth that clocks cannot measure, that there is human time and olive tree time. Human time is linear, urgent, divided into minutes that are spent and never return. Olive tree time is cyclical, patient, governed by cycles that the human mind perceives as slow, but that nature experiences as precise. An olive tree takes years to bear its first abundant harvest, decades to reach full maturity, centuries to become the stone and wood witness that some specimens become. No one criticizes the olive tree for its slowness. No one compares it to the neighbor's tree or demands that it bloom prematurely. Its process is trusted because its nature is understood. Consuelo applied this same wisdom to her own life, and particularly to her desires and projects. Not with the passive resignation of someone who accepts that things take time because there is no other option, but with the active confidence of someone who knows that the time of the universe is the most perfect geometry that exists, and that interfering with that geometry, with the impatience of the ego, is like trying to convince an olive tree to produce olives in winter. The concept of perfect timing is one of the most misunderstood in popular spiritual teachings about manifestation. Many practitioners interpret it as a promise that what they desire will eventually arrive, as a comfort during the wait. But perfect timing is not a promise of late arrival. It is a description of extraordinary precision. The universe doesn't operate on arbitrary timelines or with purposeless delays. Every element of what you wish to manifest has maturation conditions that are as real and precise as the conditions a seed needs to germinate. The right temperature, sufficient humidity, the correct depth, and light at the right moment. When all these conditions align, germination doesn't take long. It's instantaneous within the parameters of the natural process. The same applies to your manifestations. When your inner vibration has reached the necessary level of coherence, when external people and circumstances have aligned in the way the universe knows best, When the learning that manifestation requires of you has been sufficiently absorbed, convergence occurs with a speed that often surprises even the practitioner. A musician named Alejandro had spent 10 years composing in the darkness of a small apartment, playing for audiences of 20 people in bars that smelled of dampness and lukewarm beer. It wasn't the life he had imagined when he chose music as his path. But he wasn't giving it up either, because something inside him, deeper than ambition or wounded pride, knew he was exactly where he was meant to be. What Alejandro couldn't see from within his own process was what those 10 years were building. Not just technical skill, though that too, but something much more subtle and more valuable. A relationship with music that didn't depend on external validation to exist. A character forged in perseverance without visible reward. An authenticity that can only be cultivated when you create the work you love without an audience to confirm it. In the 10th year, something converged. Not a great stroke of luck or a pre-planned strategic connection. A series of small synchronicities, aligned over the space of 3 weeks with a precision that Alejandro described as feeling like the universe finally said yes. The right person heard the right song at the right time, and what followed transformed his trajectory irreversibly. Looking back, Alexander could see with perfect clarity why each of those 10 years had been necessary. Not as punishment or as an arbitrary test of perseverance, but as the exact time required to build the person he needed to become in order to inhabit the level to which he was being called. This introduces a dimension of perfect timing that few people consider. That sometimes manifestation is delayed not because the universe is withholding what you deserve, but because you are still becoming who you need to be in order to receive and sustain it. A person who hasn't developed the emotional maturity to handle success may receive it, but cannot hold on to it. A person who hasn't worked on their relationship patterns may attract love, but will destroy it with the same patterns that attracted it. A person who hasn't healed their relationship with money may receive it, but will lose it in ways that exactly replicate the scarcity beliefs they've been operating under. The universe, in its benevolent wisdom, sometimes protects the seeker from a premature manifestation that would crush him rather than uplift him. Consuelo understood this when she tended her olive trees. She never forced the harvest. But neither did she abandon the tree. She watered it. She pruned it at the right time. She protected the roots in winter. And when autumn came, the harvest was exactly proportional to the care she had given it during all the invisible months. Perfect timing isn't an invitation to passivity. It's an invitation to active trust, to keep doing what you can do today with dedication and love, always trusting that the process has a geometry that transcends your ability to calculate, to be the gardener of the olive tree, not the impatient customer demanding their oil before the olives have ripened. There is also a practice that spiritual teachers recommend for cultivating the right relationship with the timing of manifestation. Learning to celebrate the process with the same genuineness with which you celebrate the outcome. Not as a consolation prize, but as an acknowledgement that the process is as real and valuable as the destination. That Alexander's 10 years in shady bars were not the price of admission to success. They were in themselves a life rich in experiences that shaped him in ways that early success never could have. When you begin to see the process as real life, not as waiting time before real life begins, something fundamental shifts in your relationship with time. The present ceases to be an obstacle on the path to the future and becomes the only place where life happens. And from that full and attentive present, manifestation flows with a naturalness that anxiety about the future can never produce. Chapter 14. Practice. The letter to the olive tree. Choose something you've been waiting to manifest that's taking longer than you expected. Write it a letter as if you were writing to an olive tree you're tending. Thank it for the years of invisible roots. Describe the care you've given it. Acknowledge that you can't see what's happening underground, but trust that something essential is being built. Then ask it what specific care it needs from you right now, not in the future, but today. Listen to the answer that arises from within without judgment. Often, the most honest answer won't be to work harder. It will be to trust more, to rest, or simply to be present with what already is. The seed that was always a tree. There is something that the wisest gardeners know, and that gardens teach better than any book, that within each seed, however small, the complete tree already exists. Not as a vague promise or an abstract potential, but as a contained reality, awaiting only the right conditions to reveal itself in the visible world. You are that seed. And these pages have attempted to be some of those conditions. Throughout 17 chapters, you have journeyed through the most essential dimensions of the power that has resided within you since before you had a name to identify it. You have explored the silent language with which the universe speaks to you and listens to you. You have discovered the architecture of the thoughts that build or limit your reality. You have learned that the heart, much more than an organ of feeling, is the primary transmitter of your frequency into the realm of possibility. You have learned that the words you speak are not sounds that dissolve into thin air, but seeds that fall on the most fertile soil that exists, the quantum field that surrounds and permeates all of existence. You have understood that the way you see yourself is the invisible mold into which the universe pours the substance of your experiences. You have recognized that the vibration you inhabit is not a consequence of your circumstances, but their deepest cause. You have found in the gift of not knowing a freedom that control can never offer. You have understood the sacred geometry of time that ripens seeds at their precise moment. You have discovered that the invisible web of souls connects you to everything and everyone in ways that rational strategy could never anticipate. You have practiced the art of living from the outcome, of inhabiting the state that corresponds to what you desire, before the evidence to justify it arrives. And in the last chapter, you touched upon something that no technique can produce, but that all techniques practiced honestly and consistently eventually reveal. That at the center of your being, there is a place that is already at home, that is already whole, that needs no further manifestation to justify its peace. From that center, everything else unfolds differently. Practices become expression rather than effort. Manifestation becomes collaboration rather than supplication. Life becomes co-creation rather than survival. The seeds you have planted in these pages, in the form of new understandings, adopted practices, and questions that have opened you up rather than closed you off, those seeds are now in the soil of your inner field. What waters them is your attention. What nourishes them is your consistent practice. What protects them is your willingness to trust the process even when you cannot see what is happening beneath the surface. You don't need to do everything perfectly. There is no such thing as a perfect spiritual practitioner. And if there were, they would probably be the least interesting of all, because they would have stopped learning. What you need is the willingness of someone who returns to the garden every day, even if there are days when the soil looks dry and the sprouts take longer than expected. The universe you have found in these pages is not a dispensary of desires nor a reward mechanism. It is something infinitely more wondrous, a living system of loving intelligence that includes your existence as one of its most precious moments. It responds to your frequency with the same fidelity with which a mirror responds to the face reflected back at it. It continually conspires in your favor, even if those conspiracies don't always appear as you expected. The law of attraction isn't a technique you learn. It's a description of what's already happening. You've always been attracting what corresponds to your dominant frequency. The difference now is that you know it. And that knowledge changes everything, because what you become aware of can be chosen. Choose carefully. Choose from love instead of fear. Choose from abundance instead of lack. Choose from who you know you are at your best, not from who the world has convinced you are on your worst days. Because the seed never forgets. It is a tree, even underground, even in total darkness, even when the winter cold seems endless. Deep within, it organizes every atom of its being toward the light. Not because it consciously decides to, because it is its nature. Yours, too. The tree that you already are waits, with the infinite patience of that which knows it exists, for the final condition to reveal itself completely, that you remember it. You already remember. Before we say goodbye, I want to remind you that the first link to explore this topic in much greater depth is in the description. Don't just settle for knowing a little more. Invest in yourself, follow your curiosity, and discover everything you're capable of achieving. See you soon.